Welcome to another tutor short provided by the Educational Support Services Department of Lehigh Carbon Community College in Snexville, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Allentown. These videos review key learnings for the science courses provided here at L-Tri-C. And please remember that the Educational Support Services Department does provide walk-in tutoring 5 days a week.
Hello and welcome to the Anatomy and Physiology 2 tutor short on blood vessels and structures of the heart, given by your tutor Kim Rylander. Here is a picture of the anterior side of the heart. We will now go over the structures and blood vessels that are on the outside of the heart. Starting with our superficial anatomy, here is our right auricle and our left auricle. Our anterior interventricular sulcus is located here. Remember from Anatomy 1, when we were learning about the brain, the sulcus means groove, and the anterior interventricular means that it's a groove between the ventricles. Between the atriums and the ventricles, we have a coronary sulcus located around here. This wraps around the entire heart. Some of the major vessels of the heart is the superior vena cava, located here. Not shown, but we also have the inferior vena cava, which would be located down here. We will see that in the next slide. We also have our pulmonary trunk, which splits into our pulmonary arteries. And then we have our aorta. We can also see some of our pulmonary veins located here. The difference between our pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins is the pulmonary arteries are going to the lungs, while the blood coming from the lungs is coming back through the pulmonary veins. Other vessels of the heart are the anterior interventricular artery, located here, in red. We can also see the great cardiac vein right next to it, located here. We are now looking at the right side of the heart. This gives us a better view of the structures on the right side of the heart. Here we have the right coronary artery, located here. We can also see now the inferior vena cava. Here we can also see our marginal artery. Remember, the right coronary artery sits in the coronary sulcus. We are now looking at the left side of the heart. Here we can see the circumflex artery. We can also see how the anterior interventricular artery and the great vein sit directly into the anterior interventricular sulcus. We also get a better look at the ligamentum arteriosum. We can also see how the pulmonary trunk leads into the pulmonary arteries, and below that we see the pulmonary veins, which drain into the left atrium. We get a better view of the left and right pulmonary arteries and veins. We also see the coronary sinus located here, the posterior interventricular vein, inferior vena cava, and the posterior interventricular artery, which is stemming from the coronary artery. All of these arteries and veins lie in the posterior interventricular sulcus. We are now looking inside of the heart to get a better view of the atriums, ventricles, valves, and other structures. So what are the chambers? Where are they located, and what are these functions? So in the top left, we have the right atrium. And we also have the left atrium. Both atriums are located on the top portion of the heart and are the receiving chambers. Below them, we have the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Their function is primarily to pump the blood. Here we can also see between the right atrium and the right ventricle is the tricuspid valve. And between the left atrium and the left ventricle, we have the bicuspid valve, or the mitral valve. Each valve is held by strings called chordae tendineae, which are bound to papillary muscles located down here. Papillary muscles give the valve structure and helps it open and close. Located near the bottom portion of the ventricle, we see trabeculae carneae. Within the atriums themselves, they also have pectinate muscle, which would be inside of the atrium. Dividing the two ventricles, we have the interventricular septum, located here. Lastly, we can see the three layers of the heart. On the outside of the heart, this layer is called the epicardium. The next layer, located here, is the myocardium, and the layer inside the ventricle is called the endocardium. We are now looking at the inside of the heart, but on the right side. We get a better view of the pulmonary semilunar valve, which allows blood from the right ventricle to drain into the pulmonary trunk, and then into the pulmonary arteries, which will go into the lungs to become oxygenated. We are now looking inside of the heart, but on the left side. Here we can see how the pulmonary arteries now have oxygenated blood because they're coming from the lungs and drain into the left atrium. They will pass through the bicuspid valve and drain into the left ventricle, which will exit through the aortic semilunar valve and pass through the aorta to go to the rest of the body. In this slide, we are now going to discuss blood flow. On this slide, we are going to discuss blood flow by going through the major vessels and valves. Starting in the right atrium, all the blood is deoxygenated and is either coming from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. The blood will pass through the tricuspid valve and drain into the right ventricle. The ventricle will push the blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, which will split into the left and right pulmonary arteries, which will go to the lungs. The lungs will oxygenate the blood and send it back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins drain the blood into the left atrium, which will push the blood through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, which will then push the blood through The aortic semilunar valve, which is not shown here, but will be right in that area, and will allow the oxygenated blood to flow through the aorta and into the rest of the body. The oxygenated blood will travel through the arteries, arterioles, and into capillary beds located in tissues to provide oxygen to those local tissues and take away waste and other gases. That blood will become then deoxygenated and return back into the right atrium again. Thank you for watching. To view any of the models or if you have any questions, please come to the Science Lab in SH 150 in the Educational Support Services Center. Thank you.